Hello everyone, and welcome to our first asynchronous lesson in the course Building a Trauma-Informed Classroom. First, let's go over what you can expect from these lessons. We'll start with a brief overview of the topics covered in the daily synchronous lesson. Next, we'll do a deeper dive into some of the most important concepts from the day's topics. Finally, we'll walk you through the assignments for each day's lesson. Those are designed to give you opportunities to expand your knowledge and apply the concepts presented. So today's sync lesson was an introduction to the course and some of the key concepts we'll be discussing in subsequent lessons. We covered the definition of trauma and gave some examples, such as child abuse, domestic violence, intergenerational trauma, and of course, the many and varied impacts for each of us of the current pandemic. Next, we discussed adverse childhood experiences, and we watched the video of the awesome Dr. Burke Harris, where she talked about toxic stress and the result of prolonged exposure to adversity. That was followed by a discussion of how prolonged stress and trauma can actually impact brain development in children. Finally, we touched on the importance of recognizing that as caregivers, we're at high risk for secondary traumatic stress. We hear a lot of stories during the course of the school year, and those can really take a toll on the soul. So in this lesson, we're going to take a closer look at the concept of private logic and how it can impact children's thinking and behaviors. We'll also talk a bit more about secondary traumatic stress, and you'll find a reading assignment about this in our Google Classroom. Finally, we'll talk more about self-care and how it isn't just about getting your hair and nails done once a month. So with regard to private logic, each human being develops their own belief about the world around them based on culture, social structures around us, and our life experiences. Alfred Adler termed this private logic. Private logic is how each individual perceives the world around them. This then determines how we interpret the world, what beliefs we hold about ourselves and those around us, and how we behave in order to get our needs met. We use our private logic to make decisions about ourselves and to set personal goals. For example, every individual is hardwired to need a sense of belonging and significance. As a result, individual behavior is often driven by the need to achieve this goal. It's safe to say also that an individual's private logic is not necessarily always very logical. So it's helpful to think of trauma as an experience rather than as a single event. A child's experience with trauma may forever change how they view themselves, others, and the world around them, and that can have a powerful impact on their behavior. Let's try an activity to drive home the concept of private logic in children. Close your eyes as I read the following statements. Try to picture a student in your class for whom these statements might be a part of their private logic framework. What behaviors might you see from that child? So for the first statement, I will do whatever I have to do to let you know that I am afraid and do not feel safe. If that's part of a student's private logic framework, what behaviors might you see from that child in the classroom? Number 2, I will do whatever I need to do to stay in control. To me, I'm fighting for my life and need to survive. 3, I will fight anyone or anything that tries to control me. The only person I can trust is myself. I have learned that if I trust other people, they may abuse or abandon me, and I will be alone anyway. Number 4, I will not do what you want me to do, because if I do, I might fail, and I can't take any more pain or risk disappointing you. So it takes a lot of mental and emotional energy to hear and be present for students, especially those who've experienced trauma. In class today, we talked a bit about secondary traumatic stress. The symptoms of secondary traumatic stress are often indistinguishable from those experienced directly as a response to trauma. When you think about it, one child may tell you about their trauma, and they walk away feeling better because they've had someone to talk to about it. You, as a teacher, often have a line of 5, 6 other students in your class, all who want or need to share with you their own form of trauma. You carry the weight of those stories, and it makes sense that a person can start to feel awfully worn down. Not only are you carrying the stories of your students, but those may actually stir up some of the traumatic experiences from your own past. It's important to note that secondary traumatic stress is a very predictable and natural reaction. Some of the symptoms you may notice are fatigue, over and under eating, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, emotional numbing, detachment or withdrawal, trouble concentrating or remembering things, being quick to anger. Some folks may re-experience personal trauma from your own past in the form of nightmare or triggers. You may also experience symptoms such as hypervigilance and feeling like if you stop to take a break, the world will absolutely fall apart. So how do we protect ourselves against this? We can protect ourselves against and manage secondary traumatic stress by practicing self-care through regular exercise, a healthy diet, and sufficient sleep. Activities such as yoga or meditation can be very helpful. You'll receive a copy of today's synchronous lesson slides in the Google Classroom folder, where you can revisit the self-care wheel for more ideas. We've even included a self-care plan for your own use in case you need some help thinking of ways to take care of yourself. Don't forget that it's also important to take time away from stress-inducing situations and people. Spending time with family or friends or focusing on a project or hobby can help. Later in the class, we'll talk about the importance of establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries in our personal and professional lives. When we talk about self-care, like I said before, it's not just referring to taking an afternoon to get your hair and nails done, although who's been able to do that with the pandemic, right? Realistically, some of us may not even have the time or money to do that. As I mentioned earlier, one of the assignments for this class is to complete a self-care assessment. We ask you to complete the assessment not to make you feel guilty about everything you're not doing, but to help you see some of the areas of self-care where you may be doing really well, and also to identify some areas that you might be able to work on. Take the time to look objectively at the results of your assessment and see if you can think of ways to shore up your self-care routines. This doesn't have to be a major endeavor. Self-care activities can be as simple as taking 30 seconds to do some mindful breathing or visualization of a favorite place, calling a friend who makes you laugh, putting on some music that soothes your soul or lifts your mood. Again, we'll talk more of this as we go on in the class. So that's it for today. Before our next class, you'll find activities to complete located in our Google Classroom folder. We've mentioned the movie Paper Tigers before, and you can find that on Amazon. Please let us know if you can't access it there. We also have the article about secondary traumatic stress and one about ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, that you'll also see in the folder. There are 2 different assessments in there. One is the self-care assessment we already talked about, and the other is a professional quality of life assessment called the ProQual. So both of these you'll fill out. You don't need to turn those in. Those are just for you to fill out and kind of look over where you stand and kind of think about your own assessment of where you are in both of those areas right now. So there's also an activity for you to complete to practice the concept of private logic. You'll have a copy of the slides from our synchronous lesson and a tool for your own use to develop and build a personal self-care plan. We threw in the ACE questionnaire and some important notes about it if you decide to fill that out for yourself. The last one is not an assignment, but a resource for your own use. That's the personal self-care plan. So thank you all so much for your time today. We look forward to seeing you in our next class, and we hope that everyone has a great day. Thanks. Bye.